My jealous stepsister humiliated me by turning up at my wedding with the neighbor's child and claiming it was my love child. She was arrested for kidnapping and abandoned by her father. My stepsister, Amanda, 26, showed up at my wedding last week. She brought a child I'd never seen before and just showed up. My stepsister and I have never gotten along, and we stopped speaking as soon as we went to college. We moved out when we went to college and haven't spoken since. My mother married my father when we were in secondary school, and she has been nothing but trouble ever since. My father divorced my mother when I was very young and has never been involved in our lives since. Although her parents divorced a few years before my stepfather met my mother, it doesn't make a difference to her. She was a brat and thought my mother was getting in the way of the relationship, even though the parents had already split up and the relationship had been broken for a long time before my mother met my father. She didn't like my mother, but she hated me even more and always did her best to make my life difficult. Our parents tried to get us to spend time together for a while, but then they gave up because they knew Amanda would never be friendly with me. She was always making me feel uneasy. When I grew up and moved out to college, I was relieved not to have to live under the same roof as her anymore. We obviously saw each other on holidays or birthdays, but avoided talking every time we met. A year ago, something unpleasant happened. My mother called to ask me if I minded if she used some of the remaining money in my college fund. I had received a scholarship, so I didn't have to spend the money in the college fund and a little of the wedding fund for Amanda's wedding. At the time, I didn't even know Amanda was getting married, that she was engaged, or that she even had a boyfriend. We hadn't been in touch for a long time, so I said no, because I knew the money might come in handy at some point. My mother didn't insist. She just asked the question, and when I refused, she said she was going to hang up, and we didn't talk about it again, because I forgot about it. It wasn't until recently that I learned that Amanda had to cancel the wedding because her father adamantly refused to pay for the lavish, extravagant wedding she had envisioned, in which she had expected our parents to pay for everything from the wedding venue to the wedding dress. He did set aside a sum, but her demands were beyond his budget. Everything she chose was expensive, and the wedding budget was ridiculous and would eat up his savings, so her father refused. So she asked my mother to chip in, too, but she couldn't because her own mother had said she couldn't afford it. My mother had set aside some money for my wedding, but she refused to contribute without first asking me and making sure I was okay with it. When I told her no, she refused to pay, and Amanda and her fiancé or his family could not afford the wedding on their own, so they ended up canceling it. Another reason my stepfather and mother refused to pay for the wedding was that Amanda and her fiancé had been together for less than a year before they got engaged, and he knew the marriage would not last. So he did not want to spend a fortune on an unnecessarily lavish wedding without being sure. He made the right decision because a few months after the engagement, her fiancé left her over some trivial argument. For some time after that, she was very angry because she thought that if they had paid for the wedding and she had married her fiancé, he would not have left her in that way. She did not stop talking to them because she was still quite financially dependent on them, but she made it clear that she was very unhappy with them. A few months ago, I got engaged to my boyfriend of almost 6 years. I told my parents, and they offered to pay for the wedding, but he and I wanted a simple, small, intimate ceremony with no fuss and said we'd rather use the money for the future. My mother transferred all the money from the wedding fund to me, along with the rest of the money from the college fund, and even my stepfather sent me about $10,000. They told us we could do whatever we wanted with the money and that they wouldn't mind if we had a big SC wedding, but my husband and I were determined to have a small wedding. A few weeks ago, I made the mistake of posting a Facebook status thanking everyone involved in the wedding. Of course, I thanked my parents for their financial and emotional support, and I mentioned my mother and stepfather because in my mind they will always be my parents, even from high school. I don't consider Amanda my sister, but I consider my stepfather my father. It was an emotional post, and a lot of people commented on it, and I think that's why it appeared on Amanda's feed. She saw that post and was probably pretty angry because she realized that our parents were helping me plan my wedding and refused to do the same for her. She didn't do anything about it until the day of my wedding, and we didn't realize how angry she was. Unfortunately, she showed up after the wedding was over, when we were about to have lunch. She walked into the venue with a random kid who I later found out was her neighbor's son. He walked straight up to me, yelled at me, and accused me of stealing her dream wedding. She yelled at me, saying that I had stolen her wedding and her father, and that now her father liked me better than her. My husband was standing right next to me, and I was talking to some cousins when she started yelling at me. Soon everyone was staring at us. My parents came to the rescue and told her to go away or they would call the police. She decided to drop a bombshell before leaving. She looked at my husband and told him that she had kept a secret for a long time because of me, but she couldn't do it anymore. Then she pushed the child forward and said that the child was obviously my son, born to my ex-husband, and that I had given him up for adoption a few years ago. My husband and I knew it wasn't true, and neither did my parents, but the guests seemed a little shocked, so my parents had to throw her out. While my husband and I explained that Amanda had just gone mad with jealousy and started making up lies to discredit me after we'd calmed the guests down. We ate lunch and turned up the volume to make people forget about the stupid incident. When my husband and I got home, we sat down with my parents and his parents, and my parents explained what had happened in the past so that we could understand why Amanda was so angry. I thought it was really childish of her to make such a big deal out of it, especially since I didn't think my parents had a good or valid reason for not wanting to pay for her wedding. First, her wedding was extremely expensive compared to mine. At least my husband and I paid for our wedding and didn't expect our parents to cover all the costs. Second, she had not known her ex-fiancé for long, whereas my husband and I had been together for a long time, so my parents knew that we were serious about each other. Please forgive my bluntness, but they knew that they would not be wasting their money by paying for our wedding, so I think it is unfair for her to compare my wedding to the one she had in mind. My parents apologized for this, especially my stepfather, who felt very embarrassed by Amanda's behavior. We did not blame them, as they had no control over the situation. We discussed it, everyone went home, and that was that. But the next day I got a call from my mother, who told me that Amanda had apparently taken the baby from a neighbor's house without even telling her. Amanda called them in the morning to tell them about it and asked her father to help get money for her bail and find a lawyer. I felt that she had gone too far to humiliate me at my wedding, and I felt a little sorry for her, but I didn't think I owed her an apology. However, since her arrest, her friends have been defending her, accusing me of being the bad guy. They seem to think it's all my fault, because they apparently think my parents have always favored me and that I have always been their favorite child. I have always felt that our parents have treated us equally and never favored one over the other. We both always had equal opportunities, and I think it's a question of who can make the most of what they have. So the accusation that I'm a golden boy seems a bit unfair. We went to the same school, and then I really did get a scholarship because I was a better student, which is why I left a university fund behind, so my parents had nothing to do with it. And the fact that I spent more time with my husband than she did with her boyfriend was also beyond the control of our parents. My stepfather had made it clear that he would definitely pay for his daughter's wedding, but at the time she was being very unreasonable and making crazy demands that no sensible person would agree to, so if he really wanted a wedding so badly, he would just withdraw from the wedding entirely. Then she should scale it back considerably or at least share some of the costs with her fiancé and his family, but she did nothing, just insisted on her ridiculous demands and expected our parents to do everything for her. The budget was crazy, as was her eagerness to marry a man she hadn't even known for a year, which is why our parents refused to invest in her wedding and pay for the huge wedding costs. That's all. I don't think anyone has the right to accuse me of that, but her friends at first. I thought I wouldn't care, but it's been a week and I still feel guilty. From what I understand, she's getting into a lot of trouble with the law, and despite everyone being so angry with her, my stepdad is still trying to work things out with her and the mother of the child she brought that day. My husband thinks I have nothing to feel sorry about, but I do. I feel guilty for taking money from my stepdad for the wedding and posting it online. Update 1. It's been a few days since I last posted, and I read everyone's comments today. I think you're right, I have nothing to be sorry about. Her friends just did what most friends would do, try to be there for her, and being there for her always meant belittling me and making me feel bad, so I'd say they did a good job. For a while, I did feel really bad about everything, but then I talked about it with my mother and stepfather, and most importantly, they both said it wasn't my fault, that it was her who had acted crazy and now had to face the consequences. They advised me to ignore what her friends were saying, which was hard for me because these were my classmates and now they were all against me, but there was nothing I could do about it because they had obviously already chosen sides, and mine wasn't theirs. So instead of fighting and trying to prove my innocence to everyone, I just accepted it and moved on with my life, even though there were a few people here who accused me of being their favorite and talked about how my parents had failed. Amanda asked me to clarify that I hadn't given you a one-sided story, and I even included everything I had said. Innocence, I might as well accept it and move on with my life, even if there are a few people here who accuse me of being their favorite and talk about how my parents have failed. Amanda asked me to clarify that I had not given you a one-sided story, and I had even included what I had said when I refused to share my funds with her, which was why she could not get married because my mother also refused to provide funds. I did this selfishly, but to be fair, she never tried to be my friend and had always treated me, so I saw no reason to be nice to her. There were times when I even took revenge on her by speaking harshly or rudely to her. Our parents would scold us for it. If I had been the most favored child, they would not have had any complaints about me. If we are just talking about the wedding, I have already explained how I raised the money and why she did not get the same treatment. She never considered our parents and only wanted to have a grand wedding for herself without paying out of her own pocket. She should be grateful that our parents can still afford to support her and that her father has always tried to help her. She is a career woman, but unfortunately she doesn't take her work seriously, which is why she has stagnated for years. But her lifestyle means she can't cope with this income, and she is not willing to live frugally or work hard, so she has to borrow money from our parents almost every month. They have done a lot for her, but she expects them to spend more money on her stupid, extravagant wedding last year. When they didn't do so for valid reasons, she got upset and started acting as if she were the victim. This shows a complete lack of gratitude in her. Despite all this, my stepfather is still trying to help her and make sure she's okay, while her friends act as if they have done her injustice. I have worked hard to make myself an independent woman and keep moving forward in my career. I studied hard at school and university, and I work hard even now in my job. That is why I do not need to rely on my parents' money. If she does not work hard to create the same life for herself, it is not my fault, even though she has the same resources and the same support, so I really don't understand why people think I am a golden boy when that is not the case. Everything I have is the result of my hard work, and I will not let it be meaningless just because someone accuses my parents of being biased. I know what I've done, and I know what kind of people my parents are. Even though her friends accuse others of prejudice and favoritism, my stepfather still only cares about Amanda and her happiness, which is enough to show who is right and who is wrong. What disappoints me is that even though our parents have done so much for her, she still can't see that and just wants to be a victim, begging everyone for sympathy. Honestly, it's really sickening. Update. The child's mother and my stepfather reached a settlement, and she agreed to drop all charges in exchange for nearly $25,000. 00. Although the amount is not small, I think everyone's children are worth it, and my stepfather is no exception. He offered to pay in installments, but she wanted a lump sum, which caused my stepfather no small amount of trouble, but he found a way to work it out. Unfortunately, freedom does not mean being grateful to one's parents, and she continues to do as she pleases. My mother told me that she has not thanked them yet, and she was furious when she talked to me about it. It's been a few days now, and Amanda knows exactly what's going on, but she hasn't even tried to thank them. I know she's a repulsive person, but even by her standards, this is despicable. My mother said that my stepfather is trying his best to hide his feelings and not say anything, but she knows that he is deeply hurt. We were leaving for our honeymoon in 2 days, but we decided to visit my family one last time in the following weeks before we left to make sure my stepfather was okay. He was a good man, and he deserved a better daughter than Amanda. That was my reason for being there. I wanted to go see him and make sure he was okay, at least on the right side. Amanda's friends stopped complaining. Her parents never stood up for her and always took my side, but now it was over. Her friends stopped complaining. They know they're lying, but they don't stop complaining. I really wish I'd said something to them at the time, but now that all the posts have disappeared, I can't say anything. But I know it's not over, because Amanda will definitely speak her mind eventually. And when she does, her friends will fight for her again. They won't stay silent this time, and neither will I. But I just got married, and I want to enjoy the honeymoon phase for a while. Picking on her when she's so down doesn't feel very good, and my parents are worried sick about her, so there are a few reasons why I didn't say anything or get involved in the drama this time. But if she makes any more outrageous comments about me, then I will definitely let her know, and I'm sure my parents won't have any problems with that either. Update to this. Hi, it's been almost a month. My husband and I just got back from our honeymoon, and we got home a few days ago, and it's been an emotional roller coaster from the start. Amanda is no longer part of our family. She made a public statement on social media. I didn't see it and wasn't told because I was on my honeymoon and don't check social media or people's texts unless it's important, which it obviously wasn't, so I didn't know about it until recently. To be honest, I'm relieved. My stepdad was very upset about it, but he got over it eventually, which is what my mom told me. Before I left for my honeymoon, she didn't thank them as they expected, but she did have the courage to demand that they cut me off from them, or she would no longer speak to them. She gave them an ultimatum, saying that they had to choose between me and her, because she was obviously tired of me taking away everything she deserved. I think I mentioned this in the first update, and anyone who follows this story knows that she is just making up excuses and it's all nonsense. I didn't take anything from her. She didn't have anything to begin with, not even a brain. She thought she could escape blame by just blaming me for all her failures, even though I had nothing to do with them. But our parents wouldn't put up with that. I told her that if it really came down to a choice between the two of them, they would choose me because Amanda was pretentious, spoiled, selfish, and willful, and they couldn't stand her anymore. My mother didn't say much to her because she felt that if she tried to talk to Amanda, her head would explode from sheer frustration. So she told her that she was ungrateful and that she wasn't interested in her pointless antics. Amanda told her that since she wasn't her real mother, she didn't care what my mother said to her, and then turned to her father and started talking to him. My mother obviously felt very insulted, so she left the room and didn't come back until she heard the arguing. When my mother returned to the living room, Amanda looked at her, screamed at her father, and told him to live well with his new family, then walked out of the house and slammed the door behind her. My mother later found out that the reason she left the house was because her stepfather had said to Amanda the same things my mother had said to her, and she couldn't accept that my father had now chosen me as well. So she left. If our parents didn't have a favorite when we were growing up, they definitely have one now. I don't even think it's my fault, because she deliberately behaved badly towards our parents to prove that she didn't respect them or even love them. If she really loved our parents, she wouldn't have behaved that way. She was rude to my mother because she is not Amanda's biological mother, but there is no excuse for being so cruel to her own biological father. She is the kind of person who has been using her father to support her financially for many years, and now she thinks she can abandon him and live on her own because she thinks she has a few friends who will take care of her. I sincerely hope she can have a good life, as long as she stays away from our family and stops bothering us. Because she really is worse than me. I am very happy to be rid of her.